Coming up on this week's GCN Racing News Show, are the best future pro cyclists not currently cyclists at all? A rower won the inaugural Cycling eSports World Championships, and Bora Hansgrohe have signed a ski mountaineer. Mathieu van der Poel returned to Cyclocross with a bang last weekend, but didn't have it all his own way. The UCI have been very busy with new protocols for concussion and new barrier standards, amongst other things. We take a look at new kits for Deceuninck Quickstep and Groupama FDJ, and at the transfer market, which still seems to be in full swing. First up though, pro cyclists, watch out, because other sports stars are stealing your limelight. Hot on the ski jumping heels of Primož Roglič, Androni Giocattoli signed Spanish cross-country skier Marti Vigo, and then last week, Bora Hansgrohe announced that they'd signed up Anton Poelzer, a 27-year-old German skier and mountaineer who reportedly has physiological parameters such as VO2 max, which are off the charts. Now, my first thought was, yes, he might be gifted and talented, but is he really going to be able to cope with the rigours and dangers of pro cycling? And then I saw this. Holy smokes. I don't think that we need to fear that he has any fear. I mean, that just looks utterly ridiculous. You can also see him here though at the SkiMo World Cup in his hometown of Berchtesgaden in Germany. SkiMo being a cross between skiing and mountaineering. So basically going up and then back down again as fast as you possibly can. Poelzer will actually continue with his winter sports activities right through to April, at which point he will make his debut for Bora Hansgrohe over on the road. Now, the team are not expecting the earth from him, but they have some literal high hopes for him when it comes to the high mountains. However, having never raced a bike before, there is no doubt he's going to have a lot to learn when it comes to riding in a bunch, and indeed getting to those mountains in the right place, having not used up too much energy to get there. It's going to be an interesting experiment, that's for sure. Meanwhile, the inaugural UCI eSports Cycling World Championships on Zwift took place last Wednesday, but it wasn't a cyclist who won the men's event, but rather a rower. Now, Jason Osborne is a German lightweight scholar who will be competing on the water at the 2021 Tokyo Olympics for his country. Now, he's already been a world champion in that discipline, but he's also no stranger to cycling. He won the Alpe de Zwift race this year, and he's also been on record as saying that it's his second favourite sport and that he will take it up full-time after the Olympics in Tokyo. Now, he's acutely aware that there is a big difference between Zwifting and real-world bike racing, but he's another rider who's caught the attention of World Tour teams due to his incredible physiology. Which makes you wonder whether it's in sports other than cycling that team scouts will be focusing their attention on in years to come. Primož Roglič and Mike Woods are amongst a number of riders who've proven that you can switch sports relatively late and still make a very large impact. Now, scouts are already turning their attention to the junior ranks of cycling as much as the under-23s, and that's due to the increasing number of ridiculously young riders who are winning the world's biggest pro races. But maybe now they'll be looking outside of our own sport. And if any scouts are watching this show, I just want to make it known, I've been doing a lot of running recently, so let me know if you want my CV. Moving very quickly on, it was Ashley Moorman who cemented her position as the queen of e-racing in what is presumably her last outing before moving to the SD Works team next season, the team that has been known as Bulls Dillmans for the past few years. And what a way to finish off her current contract with CCC Live, winning the first ever rainbow jersey in that discipline. Right, let's now head over to Jeremy in the States to wrap up the events of the weekend and the return of Mathieu van der Poel to cyclocross.
Thank you, Dan. We had two races on the weekend. On Saturday, it was the third round of the X2O Badkamers Trophy, aka Stelvio in Antwerp, Belgium. Now, the women, as usual, kicked things off, and straight out of the gate, it was the rider of the season, perhaps, the Telenet Balawasa Lions rider, Lucinda Braun, who would shoot out of the start gate and avoid several crashes that happened on the start straight to take the whole shot and then pretty much immediately take a sizable gap over the current world champion, / Celine Del Carmen Alvarado of Alpecin Fenix. Now, Anna Kay of Star Casino would feature in the front group, as would Anna Marie Verst of the 777 women's squad and Denise Betsema of the Powell Salzen Bingold team. Now, as the laps ticked over, Alvarado suffered the unthinkable, a mechanical, but it wasn't just any old mechanical. It was a piece of metal, not shrapnel like has been found at this race in the past when they had to remove a World War II bomb from the course after a sniffing dog found it. But this was actually a piece of metal wire that got tangled in her spokes and her cassette, which forced the world champ to have to run all the way to the pits and put her out of contention for the race. She was not a happy camper, to say the least. Now, Denise Betsema, though, would emerge as the smoothest rider on the day, nailing sand section after sand section. Wurst and Braun would try to chase, and Braun would do an incredible last lap to be able to close the gap way down, but just couldn't quite get there. And Denise Betsema would win the Stelvio. Braun would finish 4 seconds down, and Anna Marie Verst would round out the podium with 3rd place. Now, Lucinda Braun would take over the lead in the X2O trophy, followed by the previous leader, Yara Castelline, at 50 seconds, and Denise Betsema with 3rd overall at 54 seconds. Now, in the men's race, the talk of the town was the return of the big dog, Mathieu van der Poel of Alpecin Fenix. Now, things got going quick, let's just say, off the get-go, because obviously Mathieu van der Poel was in the picture, so everybody had something to prove on the day, and Lars van der Haar would be that rider from Telenet Baloise Alliance to take the lead off the start, but soon afterwards, things got real in the field. The EU champ, Eli Iserbyt of Powell Salzen Bingold, came to the front, and van der Poel was content to just watch. After just one lap, though, van der Poel decided to take over the lead and lay down sector after sector of perfection, and it looked like it might just be a day of commentating, watching Mathieu van der Poel do his thing off the front, but the repetitive efforts of the cyclocross racing would catch up with the world champion. Eli Iserbyt, with the help of Quinten Hermans of Tormund CX, would bring back van der Poel around the halfway point in the race. Now, once Iserbyt regained the front and started riding like a crazy person out of each turn, van der Poel was happy to match attack after attack that he had laid down, and in the end, though, van der Poel would string together a solid last lap and ride a previously unrideable steep bit on the track that stunned Iserbyt and then eventually gapped Iserbyt off, which would allow van der Poel to take his first win of the season. Iserbyt would finish second. UK's Tom Pidcock of Trinity Racing would quietly sneak his way into 3rd place on the day. Now, on Sunday, it was the 6th round of the Super Prestige from Havre. Now, it is a classic event on the cyclocross circuit year after year. This year, it celebrated its 43rd edition. Now, on the women's race, it was led out by yesterday's winner, Denise Betsema. Alvarado quickly chased, followed by Braun. Those three would, of course, again lock horns at the front, but it was Braun that would take a ton of risks on the treacherous descent and set a very hard tempo on the heavy peanut butter mud climbs on the backside of the course in Havre. Alvarado would yo-yo on and off of the front group, but would consistently ride in 3rd place for the day. But in the final laps, the talk of the town was the 23-year-old American champion, Clara Honsinger of CannondaleCyclocrossWorld.com, who would move up into 4th place after a disastrous start to nip at the heels of Alvarado, threatening her spot on the podium. But in the end, would be Braun that would take a well-earned win on the day. Betsema would place 2nd. Alvarado would finish out in 3rd. Honsinger would ride to a career best 4th place in Havre. A sign of things to come, hopefully, for the American champion as we head into the cursed period, which starts up next weekend. Now, in the men's event, it was straight to business. Tom Pidcock, the British national cyclocross champion, riding for Trinity Racing, also the under-23 mountain bike world champion, the e-mountain bike world champion, Baby Giro winner. Anyways, he would put the entire field on notice from the first moments of the race. Toon Arts would get across, as would world champion Mathieu van der Poel, but nothing was going to stop a laser-focused Tom Pidcock from making history in Havre. The lead would change a handful of times between those three riders. Toon Arts, though, would be the first to drop off. And then in what Pidcock would later call in the post-race interview a coming-of-age moment, he dispatched the king of cycling right now, Mathieu van der Poel, on a steep uphill bit on the muddy track in Havre. He would gap him off. The gap was 5, 10, 15 seconds. Pidcock would extend the lead not only on the steep muddy climbs, but also on the technical descents. His determination from the gun, having called the race, was apparent from the get-go, and it paid off in what he said was arguably one of the biggest rides of his life late later after the race on Twitter. It was an epic battle which made history. You can go rewatch this race from Havre over on demand on the GCN Race Pass. Pidcock puts his name on a very short list of non-Belgian or Dutch riders to win a classification cyclocross race. That's everything that I have from this insane weekend of cyclocross racing. Right back to you, Dan.
Thanks again, Jeremy. And there's plenty more to look forward to over the next few weeks when it comes to cyclocross, with the much anticipated first head-to-head battle between Van der Poel and Van Aert coming this Sunday at Namur in Belgium. And that is definitely one not to miss, even if, judging by the past few weekends, they might not have it all their own way. Also, next Tuesday marks the return of Marianne Vos in Essen, that's December the 22nd, and over the holiday period we'll have a couple of UCI World Cup events. Sunday the 27th of December in Dendermonde in Belgium, and Sunday the 3rd of January in Hulst in the Netherlands. Between those two World Cups, whilst the rest of us are recovering from New Year's Eve, Van der Poel and Van Aert will be back competing at the X2O Badkamers Trophy in Baal on the first day of 2021. So please make sure you check out Race Pass over on the GCN app if you haven't done so already. The cyclocross races have been brilliant already. Marty and Jeremy have been doing a fantastic job in calling them, and there are plenty more races to come, and the road season isn't that far away either. Happy days. Right, lots of other news to get through this week, and first up, Rod Ellingworth has already revealed where he'll be working next year after suddenly leaving Bahrain McLaren very recently. He will be back at Team Ineos, where he has the job title of Director of Racing. Now, I was surprised to see him leave Bahrain McLaren, but I was also very surprised to see him go back to Team Ineos. Yes, he was incredibly successful when he was there, but from everything I heard, it wasn't a particularly amicable parting of ways. Still, they've obviously patched up any problems there were. Now, Velon, the team-owned entity which has been trying to help generate revenue and general publicity for those teams, has lost one of its founding members. Rumours circulated around the Giro d'Italia that Mitchelton Scott were due to depart, and those rumours were confirmed last week on Cycling News. It's the first team ever to exit the group since it was set up in 2014. Hard to believe it's been going that long already, actually. And it leaves Velon with only 10 of the 19 World Tour teams in 2021. And so it's a big blow, particularly considering they were unable to run any of their Hammer Series races this season due to various complications, some of which were blamed on the UCI. Sticking with Mitchelton Scott, or Mitchelton Bianchi, as presumably they'll be called next year, they have also unveiled their bike for next year, and you will notice a couple of differences to the bikes we've seen Jumbo-Visma using for the past few seasons. So firstly, it appears as though Mitchelton Scott will use not only the Ultra XR4, but also the Specialissima, their climbing bike. But even the Ultra XR4 looks slightly different because it's got disc brakes, which Jumbo-Visma refused to use. Although I know many of you were delighted that Jumbo-Visma won so many big races with rim brakes. Beyond that, the Celeste is of course used, but that is a classy looking pair of bikes in my humble opinion, although yours might be different. You can let us know by taking the poll which we've got going over on the GCN app, a link to which you can see on your screen right now. Along with those new bikes, we've also seen the first World Tour 2021 team kits revealed. So first up, De Koning Quickstep. What do you reckon? Hot or not? Well, actually, you've already been voting over on the GCN app on this one, and it currently stands at 66% hot. Bangstead, though, in the comments was presumably one of the 34% who said not hot, as he or she said it looks like a standard kit full of logos and it needs much more duck. I like that one, though. It's hot from me, although I'm not too sure about the wolf hairs that they spoke about on the press release. The other 2021 kit is from Groupama FDJ. Now, you would be forgiven for not seeing too many noticeable differences to this year's kit, but then maybe that's a good thing. Very recognisable. Next up, the UCI have been very busy over recent weeks looking into the safety of road cycling and announcing a whole host of new measures they hope will reduce the number of serious crashes in the peloton. First up, and I think most importantly, they have introduced a new concussion protocol for all cycling disciplines as of next year. Now, one of the main difficulties with pro cycling is the amount of time it can take to get to the affected rider, and also the inability to take a time out. Cyclists instinctively want to get back on their bikes as soon as they possibly can, so as not to lose time, or contact indeed with the peloton. To help solve that issue, the UCI will require non-medical staff at the race to be trained in recognising the key signs of concussion. That will include sports directors, mechanics and riders too. And if any of those key signs are detected, the diagnosis will then be confirmed, or not as the case may be, by the race doctor. The new protocol also recommends at least 24 to 48 hours of complete rest for any rider who has concussion, with no return to competition for a week or 2 weeks if you are a junior. On top of that, there are also some new barrier standards to be used in the finale of races, particularly those that are likely to end up in a bunch sprint, although those new standards are yet to be decided and will only be done so after consultation with key stakeholders. There will also be stronger rules in place regarding rider conduct, in particular looking at the discarding of bottles and the position that riders have on their bikes, particularly when descending. Again, they didn't go into specifics, but you'd imagine that will outlaw pedalling or sitting on the top tube, and perhaps even resting your arms on the tops of the bars too. And I'd be very glad if that was the case, mainly because you see young riders and amateurs who are far less skillful trying to copy the pros in that regard. They're also looking into equipment, road hazards and a whole host of other potential dangers. So I say hats off to the UCI. They take a lot of flack, but it does appear they are being very proactive on this front, so let's give them some kudos for that. One more bit of news before we head on to transfers. Jai Hindley is auctioning off his infamous Stelvio rain jacket for charity. Now, for those of you who have no idea what I'm talking about, this was the jacket that he struggled for what seemed like an eternity to get on over the top of the Stelvio pass at the Giro d'Italia in October. It's not the actual jacket, as he discarded that later in the stage, but anyway, all proceeds from the eBay auction will go to the Australian charity Tour de Cure, which raises funds for researchers who dedicate their lives looking for a cure to that illness. Transfer news now then, and first up, 2 new riders for Bahrain Victorious, as they'll be known in 2021. Gino Mada, the young Swissman who was so impressive at La Vuelta, moves over from NTT, and Jonathan Milan, a 20-year-old Italian who steps up from the under-23 ranks. EF Pro Cycling, meanwhile, have signed 4 new riders. Fumiyuki Beppu, the most well-known of them. Both he and 30-year-old compatriot Hideto Nakane will move from Nippo Delco One Provence. Along with those 2 Japanese riders, they've also got 2 new Colombians, Diego Camargo and Daniel Arriava, both of whom will be making their debut in the World Tour. Danny Christmas is also heading for pastures new in 2021. The Brit heads home, in effect, to Drops Racing. She spent the last couple of years with Lotto Soudal Ladies. And finally, John Dibben has announced his retirement from the sport at just 26 years of age. He's a former world champion on the track and then debuted in the World Tour with Team Sky in 2017, winning a time trial at the Tour of California in his first season. However, things didn't quite go to plan the following year, causing him to drop down to continental level with Madison Genesis in 2019. Lotto Soudal gave him his final chance this season, but with few results and such a tough year when it came to contracts, Dibben found himself without one. We wish him all the best in whatever his future career is. Right, thank you for watching everyone. Let us know in the comments how you think these non-cyclists are going to get on in the World Tour over the next year or two. Too tough a transition, or will natural talent win out? I look forward to reading your opinions. I will see you tomorrow on the GCN show, or next week here on our final racing news show before Christmas. Bye for now.